Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
In terms of body image, often that relates to our self-worth or kind of self-belief, I guess. And actually, I think times of stress, times of anxiety can bring up all of our uncertainties and self-criticisms and sort of perceived flaws.
How do you advise young people to sort of almost stay in control throughout that day? Even though there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, they're going to be bombarded with messages and they've got to deal with their friends and their social groups.
Sometimes we even feel things that conflict with each other. So we might feel anxious about something at the same time as feeling excited, at the same time as feeling a bit uncertain, and that's okay. It's okay to have that full rainbow of emotions.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Tackling the stigma.
And welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday with me, Mick Coyle. Thank you to everybody who's been sending feedback about the show in the last few weeks. Social media action has been really, really good on this one. Always posting the show first thing Monday morning, and people are listening right from the off, 6 a.m. when the podcast goes live. So thank you to our great guests and thank you to everybody who continues to support the programme. Really important week this week as we record the show. We've got GCSE results. So at the time of speaking now, we've just had A-level results. Big debacle about that and everything's up in the air. For young people, though, this has been a really difficult time. And I've been working on a project alongside the mental health platform Kooth. Kooth.com, that's Kooth. There's loads of stuff on their website, and if you are sort of minded to sort of find out more about your mental health or supporting the mental health of a young person, do check out that website to find out some more. My guest on the programme is Dr. Hannah Wilson. Now, Dr. Hannah is the head of clinical governance. She's also the clinical psychology lead for Kooth, and we had a right old chat about 1,000,001 different subjects, both from what young people have experienced through lockdown, but also trying to get your head around what's going to happen to you this week as well. It's a fascinating conversation, whether you're getting your GCSE results or not. And thanks for checking out the programme. Hannah started by talking about the fact that this has been a really difficult time. It's been highs and lows, a roller coaster, not just for young people, but for everyone.
Well, I think it's really important that we remember and acknowledge that we're in a very strange time, that we're all feeling a lot of different emotions. There's a lot of uncertainty going on at the minute in general, and then for young people you've kind of got these added layers of uncertainty around what's happening with exams, what's happening with school, what's happening with the future. So I think it's very easy to become a bit overwhelmed by those things, and it's important we don't, so I would use the word pathologize them, so we don't kind of I guess necessarily assume it's a sort of problem or an illness or strange or abnormal, because actually it's a really normal and typical response to a very abnormal situation that we're all in at the moment. I think we've certainly seen amongst young people in particular that as exam results become closer, there's a lot more focus, I guess, on the next steps, on what their future is going to look like. We don't really know yet as a country of what the next year is going to look like for them in terms of going to school or planning university, or, if they want to defer a year, can they go travelling anymore? There's just so much that I think is unanswered and uncertain. And so, of course, we're going to feel anxious and stressed and I guess a little bit lost sometimes about all of that.
And that plays out in the findings of the surveys that you've done, reporting of general mental health issues almost doubled, talk of feeling suicidal. Also, issues like body image issues have emerged as well. Why is it that young people will reflect their experiences in these various different ways?
Yeah, so I think, as you say, we've definitely noticed a really substantial increase in lots of different worries and concerns for young people, and that's included things like body image or eating difficulties. And there's probably a lot of different reasons for why we've seen that. So for some young people, they've been telling us that actually access to food has changed. So certainly in the early days of lockdown, we saw a lot of panic buying, things weren't available in shops. And so where people's diets had to change because of that, actually that kind of brought up some difficulties for them around food and eating. We've also, I guess, there's been an increase in media recently, actually, about this idea of lockdown having led to weight gain for some people and a real focus on that, which I think has been really unhelpful, actually, but means that some young people have become a lot more, I guess, kind of body focused or a lot more aware of that as an aspect or an issue and thinking, should I be worrying about that if other people in the media are suggesting that I should? And I could rant about that for a long time, but I won't. I think there's also an element around kind of certainty and control. So for some people, actually what they're eating has been the only thing they've felt maybe any degree of control over in the day, when everything else has been so uncertain. And so there's maybe been a kind of element of that, of helping them try and cope with that uncertainty and find something that feels a little bit more certain or controllable for them. And I guess another factor is also just sometimes being at home more can mean that we might have different eating patterns, we might be influenced by the people around us, and that can also influence, I think, as well as in terms of body image. Often that relates to our self-worth or kind of self-belief, I guess. And actually, I think times of stress, times of anxiety can bring up all of our uncertainties and self-criticisms and sort of perceived flaws, and that whether that then plays out in people's worries about, do I look good enough? What does my body kind of say about my self-worth? And what we know is absolutely how we look says nothing about our self-worth, but unfortunately it is something that often gets linked in our minds, and that can then lead to, I guess, some big worries or concerns for people.
For a lot of people who sort of went into lockdown, particularly young people who were just like, right, let's see what the next day brings, let's get through one, almost survival mode, if you like. What are those general rules that you offer to sort of ensure that people keep tabs on those emotions during that time, so they're able to recognise maybe that they're going off in a certain direction or in a certain angle?
I think talking to people is really important. So connecting with friends or family, or if that's not kind of available or around, then there are things like Kooth that offer a safe place to go and talk about anything that's coming up for people. But I think just having a space to talk through sometimes is where you then realise, oh, actually, this is what I'm feeling, or making sense of what's around for someone. We'd certainly kind of recommend people try and keep a degree of a routine if they can, because that can be really helpful and protective around some of these stresses and uncertainties. And that routine might look a bit different to what it would have done before, but still finding a degree of kind of routine amongst the day. I think there's also something about accepting whatever feelings come up. So any emotion is valid, is okay, is understandable. It's also okay to feel lots of different things, even about the same kind of incident or the same situation. Sometimes we even feel things that conflict with each other. So we might feel anxious about something at the same time as feeling excited, at the same time as feeling a bit uncertain. And that's okay. It's okay to have that full rainbow of emotions. I think for me, what I found helpful and what we would encourage people to do is just to kind of take a few minutes each day to stop and just pause and kind of reflect on, what is it that I'm feeling today? And just bringing a little bit of curiosity to what's going on for me today, what's around, and what might I need today? And kind of trying to do that without any judgment, without any shoulds. So there's no kind of, I should feel a certain way or I should want to do a certain thing, but just that real curiosity about where am I at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, that, isn't it? That idea that you take a proactive step where you think, I'm gonna focus on this for just a moment, which then allows you to maybe just process things just a little bit differently. I'm going to throw GCSE results day into the mix as well. We all sort of remember those exam results day. The stress. There'll be psychological sort of terms for this. I'm certain of it. Of this idea that it all boils down to that moment, and that moment will, rightly or wrongly, we've been told, or we believe in our own heads, define the direction that we go in and the futures that we might potentially have.
Yeah, absolutely. I can certainly remember that feeling of this day is going to determine kind of the whole of the rest of my life. And I think it's really tricky because the further away from that day you get, the more perspective you probably get around it, and the more you realise that it is important. It does have an impact, but it is so far from the kind of be all and end all. But equally, I think when you're in that moment and you've got adults saying, oh, it's not really that important, it's actually really frustrating because it is really important to you in that moment. So it's trying to find that balance of having that perspective of not getting too caught up, like you say, in thinking this determines everything about me and all of my worth. But equally, we don't want to dismiss young people's very understandable kind of focus on it at the minute. So I think, that is a bit of a tricky balance for us all.
The surveys that you've done, you found problems in regard to rises in depression, but I wanted to touch on young people struggling to sleep, a major issue, maybe struggling to sleep, something we associate with, an impending and upcoming event like GCSE. results days. So you've got the regular exam stress, plus you've had the whole build-up of everything that's gone on since lockdown began 150 days ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sleep is something that a lot of people are struggling with, and that's certainly what we're seeing on Kooth is an increasing number of young people telling us that they're struggling with sleep. I think that, like you say, just lockdown in general has made that really tricky. A lack of routine, a sort of lack of structure to our day makes sleep really difficult. But there's also then the sort of added stresses and anxieties, and that can make sleep extra tricky. And I think there's something really important to recognise about when we're anxious or when we're stressed, our body goes into what I would call threat mode. And when we're in threat mode, our brain's kind of programmed to try and keep us safe and to try and find out what is that threat and kind of remove it or reduce it if it can. And it makes total sense that therefore in that moment, the last thing our body wants to do is sleep, because that's not a very safe thing to do if we're in danger. It's still looking for what is the thing that's threatening me and how do I get rid of it? So it's sort of, I guess, trying not to judge the fact that we're struggling with sleep, because that's what our body's designed to do when we're threatened. But equally, what can we do to try and just bring that threat down a little bit? So things that might calm us or soothe us or help to make us feel safe, so that our sort of body and brain feel reassured that actually it's okay to have a rest, to kind of have a little bit of time out, really.
It's interesting that idea that all the problems of the world and the issues of the world feel like they're kind of out there, but actually there are sort of the psychological reasons, chemical reasons, that actually it's actually happening in your own head. So if you're feeling stressed or anxious, that's something that's going on inside your own mind. And I guess understanding that it's about the chemicals and it's about science rather than an existential unknown threat might maybe make people feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of stuff out there that talks about, understanding what's going on in our brain and in our bodies in terms of, I won't go into all of it, but things like our sympathetic nervous system that gets activated when we're under threat, and how that's then designed to make our body and our brain behave. So it's not that there's anything weird or abnormal with you if actually you're struggling to sleep when your brain is in threat, because that's absolutely what it's designed to kind of do. So yeah, it's what can we do to try and shift that a little bit and help put our body and our brain into a slightly more safe, kind of soothed mode, I guess.
For exam results day itself, when there's you've got the preparations, but then you've got the result, and then you've got the what happens now, and for good or for bad, there's uncertainty around almost confirmation of a future that's uncertain to you as well. How do you advise young people to sort of almost stay in control throughout that day, even though there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, they're going to be bombarded with messages, and they've got to deal with their friends and their social groups as well. It could be, very easy to fly off the handle or look for an outlet, during that time. What do you advise to young people to try and keep that sort of, enjoy the highs and enjoy the lows if you can, but not let those become problematic?
Yes, so I think there's a lot of different things people can do, and different things will probably work or fit for different people. So I'd say even before the day, so kind of, thinking in that morning, as in before getting results, what do I want to do with the day? As in, who do I want with me? Kind of, it's okay if that's yes to certain people and no to other people. Thinking about who's going to be my best support and who can be there regardless of what my feelings are. But also thinking maybe about something nice to do later in the day, regardless of the outcome, so that there's something to look forward to, and almost a bit of time where potentially we're not allowed to talk about results. So, protecting a little window of time in that day, or a space that's kind of an agreement of, for this next hour, or when I'm in this room, or whatever it might be, that actually we don't talk about it, because there's a danger that everything becomes about results now. And it's important, but it's not the only thing that matters. So that's one thing that I would say. I know it sounds really obvious and a little bit trite, but taking deep breaths is really important. There is, again, sort of psychological and physiological things that happen when we breathe more slowly and more kind of deeply that actually does help to settle our system and settle our nerves a little bit. I think there's also something about, again, all emotions are okay. So allowing whatever it is you need to feel to kind of come up. I think it can be really tricky if actually you're pleased with your outcome, but your friend maybe has had some bad news or isn't happy with them, and finding a space where you can still celebrate is really important, as well as, I guess, being mindful and kind of respectful of each other, and that everyone might be in very different places today.
You've got the situation on GCSE results day itself where there might be, when you go and you know who's going to pick you up, you know who you're going to speak to afterwards as well. But is there also the issue of the fact that there's also your future almost opens up to a certain extent on GCSE results day? And for a lot of people, for good or bad, they'll feel a tremendous sense of apprehension. Am I supposed to be a grown-up now? What does tomorrow bring? Where will I actually be in September? Do I have to get on a different bus to the one I was planning to get to? Which one of my friends will I be able to see? Can I afford the transport? What do I have to wear when I go to college or whatever is as well? It throws up a million and one different questions in regard to that, not just for the now, but for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you've just said, there's the danger it sort of almost snowballs into and this and this and this. And before you know it, it's completely overwhelming. And then we kind of shut down and almost want to run and hide from it. So one of the things that can be really helpful is writing down those questions, because believe it or not, you're not the first person to be going to college or to be going to university. These are queries we've all had many, many times. And so the answers are out there, but you don't need to figure that all out on that one day. There is some time. And I'd say don't rush into decisions. It's sometimes really helpful to either write down those worries and those questions, or write down the options if actually you're in a sort of decision-making kind of process and not feeling that you have to decide right there and then. So it might be about thinking, what are the pros and cons of all these different options? Or actually, which of these worries are things I can do something about, are things within my control? And actually, which of them are things that we just don't know the answer to yet and there's nothing I can do? So actually, I'll almost put that worry to one side until there is something that I can do with it. And that sounds really easy, and it's not actually that easy, but it can be a helpful step, I think, towards just kind of breaking it down, putting it down somewhere, and then asking people to help. There's lots of different careers advice. There'll be someone at school or college usually who can offer some input. There's lots of different forums out there that kind of talk through young people of what to expect. And we're also making sure on Kooth that we put out lots of different content and articles and discussion boards talking about all of this stuff as well, so that we can, I guess, do our bit to try and help young people navigate what is a really tricky time.
And you touched on it before, but let's just go over it again, because there'll be some people who are going, oh, this was a great day and well done, family members. But even within the same family, there may be people who are going through sort of, negative experiences because things haven't gone according to plan, or you might be able to cope yourself with what you're going through, but your next door neighbour, your best friends, those in your social group may not be in the same sort of boat. In terms of those people who are listening who are maybe family members or close friends or people getting GCSE results, what are the wrong things to say? What shouldn't you say? What should you avoid in terms of these conversations?
Yeah, so I think we can all very easily get drawn into that temptation of wanting to fix it, wanting to make it better. We don't like seeing people we care about in distress or anxious. And obviously, we have that perspective often of being a bit more removed from it and seeing the bigger picture and all of those things. For me, there's something really important about not using the phrase "at least." So we can get very drawn into saying, well, at least, I don't know, you did okay in that subject, or at least you could take a year out, or at least it could have been even worse. And we're trying to help. But at least is one of the least useful phrases actually that we can have. So instead of trying to make it better and kind of almost, I guess what can happen is young people feel that invalidates what they're feeling actually. It means they're not allowed to feel that distress or that anger or that anxiety. So actually trying to say to them, it's really understandable what you're feeling, and allowing them some space to talk it through. Actually asking kind of, what could I do that would be helpful? What do you need from me right now? They might not know the answer to that, but it allows a bit more of an open question and gives them the opportunity, I guess, to say either, I just want some space on my own for 20 minutes and I'll come and find you, or actually, can you help me find out about this? Or sometimes we make assumptions of what people need from us and it's wildly kind of off. So yeah, I think that can be helpful. And there's something about trying not to make it about us sometimes, I think. So there's a danger we get into a bit of what I learned was A, B, and C. And there's a time for that and a real use in passing on what we've learned. But I think just remembering that on exam results day, really it's just taking that breath, helping people know that you love them, that you support them, that no matter what the outcome, they are worth something and they matter to you, and this isn't going to change just because of a result. So I think trying to hold on to that bit rather than the fixing, problem solving bit, probably.
You know what? Every so often, having these sort of conversations, there'll be something that will always then stay with me, and that thing of "at least" is such a good piece of advice, because what you say it with the best of intentions, don't you? Because what you're trying to say is, well, you're looking at it from this point of view, but I'll try and find a positive within that, which is completely understandable. But in many ways, it does that thing where it almost delegitimizes that emotional reaction that you had to the negative thing. Yeah. Where, if someone's got their balance completely wrong and they're trying to find negatives where there aren't negatives, maybe that's a slightly different conversation. But we do that thing where we almost kind of go, it's almost like with a puppy, isn't it? Look at this shiny thing over here, but look at this shiny thing over there. You go, well, actually, there's a reason why you have this emotional response. So let's get to the bottom of that first before we then can, focus on that. Right, I'm writing down the phrase "at least." That's definitely one to go on the list. Brilliant stuff. What would you say I'm not going to ask you to give sort of general advice at the moment, but there is this sort of, the world has changed. Then there's also a sense as well, I think, from this generation that they're the first to have this experience of exams getting results in this way. For a lot of young people, they were told they were building up to this moment, that this year was going to be the most important year of their lives, and that these exam results would carry with them. And it's almost like playing in the World Cup final, but they just remove the ball, just before kickoff, and then, well, we'll judge you on the games you've already played. And you'd go, well, this was my moment. This was the time to shine, and that's been removed. And there's resets and opportunities like that, but that time isn't necessarily really coming back. And I just wonder whether or not there's an issue around resilience in young people that they'll need, which we can't necessarily advise on as sort of members of the public, but you guys can as psychologists, because it's actually a completely new experience for an entire generation of young people that nobody's really experienced before, and that's quite something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all in slightly uncharted territory now, and therefore I'd say it's more important than ever just to not judge whatever's coming up for you, really, because we don't have a yardstick for this. We don't have a kind of benchmarking, process for what we typically feel in this situation. It is new to us, and I think it is completely understandable that young people might actually feel quite angry about certain aspects of the process. They might feel quite lost. They might feel quite anxious, and that's all okay. It's okay to feel a lot of different things about it, and to actually maybe feel those things even if your results are good. Even if you're happy with them, you might still also feel resentful of some of the ways it's happened, or, like you said, of being kind of robbed of some of those potential experiences or opportunities. And I guess one of the things I think can be helpful is so I'd think of it as a reflective journal, but I guess something about sometimes writing down what we're feeling can be really useful. So on Kooth, we have a journaling part of the website that we encourage people to use, and young people tell us they find it really helpful just to put it down, just to kind of get it out. What is it that I'm feeling? And for that to be okay. I think we are going to have to think about, for the next year, 2 years, 5 years even, what do we need to do differently to support young people in managing the aftermath of this? We don't really know how much impact it will have longer term, by way of, like you said, what opportunities might not be there that were there before. How might they need to do things differently? I think a lot of colleges, universities, even kind of, BTEC courses, they're all going to run a little bit differently for a while. So it's all right to have a bit of extra apprehension, I think, about that as well, a bit of the unknown.
Is that something that you'll be keeping your eyes on through your organisation, that you've got young people there who didn't go through that GCSE process, and that's the 25, sometimes 30 exams over a very, very short period of time, which almost, it's a bit of a warm-up, isn't it, for your A-levels, which can be, equally intense. But there's going to be a cohort there who haven't had the first shot, if you like. Suddenly they're going to hit their A-levels and just thinking, wow, this is like my first run and an experience like that. And actually, again, they'll be the first generation to have that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think schools and colleges are very aware of that. So they're going to be keeping an eye on what do we need to do, or what do they need to do differently for their young people in preparing them for those kind of experiences and for exams, and what might be different or trickier for that cohort. But definitely at Kooth, it's one of the reasons why we track what the different issues we're seeing people bring, is because then we can tailor and change what our kind of offer is. We can write extra bits of content. We can think about what else do we need to do differently to help young people with what they're experiencing in the moment. So I guess we think it's really important to be flexible and kind of responsive to what people are bringing, and knowing that that is going to change at different times. And we, I guess, really want young people to help shape us, so to tell us what they need from us and to tell us what they're going to find useful. And it's a bit of a joint process probably of all of us figuring this out together, but we need to make sure that we're listening. I think that's probably the important part, is listening to young people and telling us, what is this like, and what is trickier, and what do you need from us, and then how do we go about that.
And I've got to take you back. What were your recollections of exam results day? Either GCSEs or A levels. What were you going through? Can you remember now? Do you sort of reanalyze your own emotions based on the training you received after?
Back then, I was very much a perfectionist, high achiever, striver. So it was all about kind of, the best results that I could possibly do. And I very much attached my self-worth to my results at the time. And looking back, I kind of feel quite sad actually for how much emphasis I was putting on that day of very much, this is like the biggest thing, and this is going to define who I am and my entire life, sort of thing. And I mean, I did well. I was pleased with, I say that I did very well, but I still wasn't pleased with it because it wasn't perfect. So again, looking back, I just think, I feel really sad that I didn't get to celebrate that in the way that I would really love my younger self to have been able to, because she did brilliantly. And yet, because there was still, some margin to improve, that's what I focused on. And I think I've done quite a lot of work for myself through different bits of like therapy and training, and that's really helped me to have a very different perspective on things like achievement and I guess motivation, and that now actually it's okay to be imperfect. I can celebrate that now.
It's interesting that, because I had and I was fine in terms of GCSE and A levels in terms of what I needed to get onto the next stage, so it was never really an issue. But I was almost obsessive over that idea of the GCSE bite size and the exam, the diary of revision and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I can still picture it by the side of my bed, the exams, and I'd like cross them off as I'd go through. And I remember there was a World Cup on at the time as well, so I'd fill in the World Cup wall chart and then cross off the exams, and I'd have like colour coding for when I'd done the revision, then the second set of revision for it. And I did that into my A levels, and again I was absolutely fine in my A levels. But something happened when I was at university where I completely lost the ability to do that or to focus on it, to the point where I was almost having panic attacks over my driving test, because I thought I'd sort of built up to the GCSEs and I got through them, and I built up to my A levels and I got through them, and I think something in my brain went, right, you've done it now, you can relax. But now whenever I get these sort of, if you get like, and it's still my anxiety dream now, that there's a course that I've not been on at university, and there's a paper due, and I've not been to any of the lessons, and it's based around that thing that I haven't done all the preparation that I'd need to do. But I left school I got my GCSE results 20 years ago this year. And that's still a thing that's kind of doing the rounds in my own mind, which is quite strange, because I was fine. I did well, but it's only ever part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's just remembering, like you said, that this affects us all in different ways. None of us are immune to stress and anxiety and worry about all of these things, because our whole society kind of tells us we should be stressed and anxious about them. So even if you are fairly confident you're going to do well, I think there's still a lot of anxiety about that. And like you said, we carry those memories and those experiences with us, and it's not impossible, I guess, to change our relationship, I think, with that pressure and with that experience, but it can be quite tricky, and it's just being kind to ourselves about it, I think.
Absolutely. Hannah, thank you so much for your time. Hannah Wilson is the Head of Clinical Governance and the Clinical Psychology Lead at Kooth, and thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.